Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The spa and spa life, the SPA, is for seek power always. That power within you to do your deeper and greater work in the world. I am so inspired and excited for my next guest and dear friend. This is Dr. Cleopatra Kamperveen, and she is a fertility specialist, right? So, and a strategist actually. So she is like, what she has done in the area of fertility, I want you guys just to pull over if you're driving and just listen to what she's up to, because it is so fascinating. I mean, when was the last time you met a fertility strategist and executive director of the Fertility and Pregnancy Institute? She is a scientist, right? Go women in science, and university professor who pioneered the field of fertility biohacking. I mean, she is so cutting edge. I love her so much. And she is also into like creating super babies. And you're probably wondering, what is that? And we'll definitely be diving into that. And to date, Dr. Cleopatra has scientifically studied tens of thousands of women and families and helped in over 18 countries and 6 continents, and to have their super babies, to have these wonderful, healthy babies out there. And she has received nearly $3 million in grant funding from multiple arms, excuse me, from the National Institute of Health, the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Standards on Technology, and private foundations, including the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Dr. Cleopatra, welcome to the show.
Diane, I'm so happy to be here with you.
Ah, this is so amazing. You know, you have just made such, breaking records in this area of science that I just find so fascinating. And, some people may have this vision of you're like this mad scientist locked in a room studying that no one knows about, what you're up to. But you have been cited in over 1,000 scientific studies in just the past 5 years alone, and have been a selected member of the Fulbright Specialists Roster. I mean, it is amazing just the level of contribution that you've done. And everyone knows that you are just so committed to having healthy babies and healthy, happy families. Can you let us know, how did you get started in this work? And were you always a science kid?
I was, but not in the way that you would think. I definitely, if you can see me right now, then you know that I don't look like what you think a scientist would look like. And if you can hear me, then I'm letting you know that. But I think that I was very early in my life using the scientific method, but I had no idea what that was. And I lost my own mother at birth, and her birth was it was incredibly difficult for our family. It was incredibly tragic. She was only 27 years old. She was just beginning her life, left behind 4 young children. And we really just spent our childhood trying to figure out how to survive. And what was so interesting was that even though I was in a terrible amount of pain trying to figure out how to survive under those circumstances, I was much more interested in the pain of other people than I was in my own. And because I was so interested in the pain of other people, I was watching very early to understand what is it that women needed when they were going into pregnancy so that their reproductive outcomes could be powerful, so that they could have super babies, which is what we now call it. And that's really the path that led me to formally becoming a scientist and to doing the work that I do. And since I started doing that so early in my life, I mean, I can remember being a 6-year-old and asking these questions and looking around trying to understand. But I went into a laboratory, a scientific laboratory, 1 month after my 18th birthday. I started at the University of Miami and never looked back. So I've been doing this formally for more than half of my life already.
Wow. It's, it's so amazing when you look at some of the, tragedies in our life and how it shapes us and how it has us ask some of these deeper questions and step into the work. And so I love that, some people get, shrink in their challenges that they have. And I love how you blossomed and expanded and just started asking all of those why questions. And, not only to help you, but just how much it's gotten out into the world. And so I love that you are the author of the forthcoming book detailing your revolutionary at-home conceiving system. And this is the Primemester Protocol. This is where you teach women to use the Primemester, which is the magical, powerful window of opportunity before pregnancy, where you literally have the power to change the quality of expression of the genes. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about what is a Primemester, and how is it that this became the focus of your work?
Thank you for asking that. This is so important because the Primemester is the best kept fertility secret, and I want everyone in the world to know about it so that they can use it to their advantage and to that of their children and their grandchildren, because we know the work that we do during the Primemester is handed down across generations, and we have scientific evidence for at least 2 generations so far. It probably persists for even longer, but we know for at least 2 generations. So this is really, really important information. So the Primemester is the 120 plus days leading up to conception. We want the Primemester to be a minimum of 120 days. There are some rare exceptions when it can be a little bit shorter than that. And I'm saying very, very rare, because I often get the question from women who are having children later on in life, can I really take the time to Primemester when I already feel like I'm running out of time? So the reality is that by taking the time to Primemester, you buy yourself more time. So it's very important for almost every person to Primemester for at least 120 days. But we do see a dose-response relationship of the Primemester to reproductive outcomes and offspring outcomes, meaning that the longer you Primemester, the better. So if you're somebody who is in your early 20s and you know that maybe you're in college and you know that you don't want to have children until you are in your 30s or 40s, it's a great idea to start learning about the power of the Primemester, start implementing the 80-20 rule of the Primemester. You probably won't implement 100%, but 80%. And then as you get closer, start folding in more and more so that you're up to 100% by the time you're 120 days out from having your super baby.
Right. Well, I'd like to just kind of, reiterate what you're talking about is the things that you're doing in this Primemester and the way that you're looking at just fertility in general and just the whole thing around epigenetics, that just not only affects yourself, but that it at least 2 generations down has that impact. How is that possible?
That is so incredible, right? It's mind-blowing because for a long time, we had this belief that our genome is fixed. So whatever you got is what you were stuck with for life, and you just had to make the best out of it. And in the last 30 plus years, we are realizing just how malleable our epigenome is. So you can never change your genes, but what you can change is how your genes express themselves. And that's the part that comes into play during the Primemester, and that you can use not only to ignite your own fertility. So a lot of the women who are coming to the Fertility and Pregnancy Institute to Primemester are women who have been struggling to get pregnant for months or years. Our record is someone who was considered quote unquote infertile for 2 decades. So these are people who've been struggling with fertility for a long time. They're coming primarily just to be able to get pregnant in the first place. But the incredible gift is that everything that you're doing to preserve and extend and ignite your fertility is also creating this robust epigenetic change so that you're giving your babies and your grandbabies the very best epigenetic foundation humanly possible. And let's talk about how this is playing out in society today and how it will continue to play out if we don't change this through our mission and people learning about the Primemester. We see that obesity has become an epidemic. Now, I want to say that first and foremost, the Fertility and Pregnancy Institute is a body positive space. We welcome and love all people. And as long as you feel healthy and you feel good, we absolutely support that. And at the same time, there's very clear scientific evidence that there is what we call a fertile zone for BMI. It's about 19 to 25. Anything below 19 or above 25 increases statistical odds of having difficulty getting pregnant, staying pregnant, and having a healthy baby. And so if you, and I should note that it's actually even more pronounced in lower BMI than in higher BMI, which people are often surprised to hear. So I'm sharing what we know statistically and scientifically about BMI, but I am absolutely not making any judgment about anyone's body. But so let's take, for example, the obesity epidemic and related diseases such as type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. These are all outcomes that were set in motion decades ago with our parents and our grandparents, and it's now surfacing as an epidemic in this time because it has finally caught up with us. If we don't intercept this trajectory, it will continue, and lifespan will continue to decrease for the first time in the history of our human population.
Right. This is such an important conversation, especially now when as people are talking, about immunity and being immunity compromised. And we have, 100% control of that, right? Of taking responsibility for our health and, having awarenesses through the studies that you've done to really, a lot of times we think, well, someone else is going to take care of our health or the government's going to take care of our health, when it's our own personal responsibility to get this research, get, the tools, and what are the things we can do to fortify ourselves in such a bigger way, and to pre-think, right? If I want to have a healthy baby, what do I need to do in this body in order to make that happen? And you're really touching on a lot of different levels as far as supporting women. And this has been something particularly over the last 24 years, where I want to talk a little bit about this cutting edge process, the fertility epigenetic tailoring that you're doing, and that the Institute helps women, in their 20s, 30s, and 40s about reversing reproductive aging. We hear about this time clock, right? And, women get to this certain age and there's maybe some fear and things are happening. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that biological clock and how people can take some personal responsibility in preparing themselves to have healthy children.
So much there, Diane. I do want to say that I want to reiterate what you've said, which is that we can't outsource our health to somebody else. And similarly, and I always say this, we can't outsource our fertility either. We look at fertility as a complex network or a system. If you can imagine the neural network in the brain, it's the same kind of thing. And just like we know that there's plasticity in the brain, there's plasticity in the fertility system. We represent this complex network that is the fertility system as the fertility triangle or pyramid. And I always say you cannot outsource your fertility triangle. Even if you're going to use medical intervention, such as IVF to get pregnant, you still have to do the work. It's just like running a marathon, as my husband would use this example when he talks to dads that we're working with. He'll say, I can't wake up, or I could, but it wouldn't be smart for me to just wake up one day and decide to run a marathon, even though I'm in really great shape. I really want to spend the time preparing for it, training for it for months in advance. And think about it, that's a marathon, that's a one-time event. Why wouldn't you put at least that much effort into preparing to make your super babies? Your babies are a lifelong endeavor, and then they are the ones who make your grandchildren. And get this is so amazing. It blows people's minds when they learn about this. You, Diane, were in your mother's ovaries when she was in her mother's womb, meaning that you were actually in your grandmother's womb, and your health and fertility started to be conditioned and programmed in your grandmother's primester and in her womb, because you were an egg in your mother's ovaries by the time she was a 20-week-old fetus. That is so amazing.
That's so mind-blowing.
That is mind-blowing. And think about what an incredible opportunity that is. So when we're primestering for our fertility, we're also shaping the health and fertility and longevity of our babies and our grandbabies. And some people feel really afraid of that responsibility, but it's actually an awesome opportunity that we can all get really excited about, especially when we have a specific system for doing it. It's not like you have to go and figure out how to do it by yourself. So I just want to reiterate that it's so true that this belief that has taken over Western society, that we can rely on somebody else to give us back our health, is not the way that we want to live. And it's the same thing with our fertility. It's not the way that we want to live. We can use technologies and medical advancements to support our health and our fertility. That's awesome. But the foundational work to do is still our own. Right. So that's really important. And this is so aligned with the discussion of the biological clock, because the messages that we get about the biological clock are equally conflicting and confusing as they are about nutrition and other aspects of our health in general. So the reality is that we get these conflicting messages. One message is that if you reach 35 and you haven't had your babies yet, you're over the hill. It'll be a geriatric pregnancy. Your odds of getting pregnant are so small. We're hearing those messages constantly. But the even louder message is the one that basically tells us to ignore our fertility and just expect that it's going to be there for us when we're ready for it. So when we're younger, all we ever hear about is making sure that we don't get pregnant without meaning to get pregnant. All of the effort that we put into our fertility and our biological clock is to silence it so that it doesn't become a problem. And of course, managing when we have children is a really important part of life and progress for women. So we want to be able to do that, but we want to be able to do that in such a way that it's not dampening or harming our fertility in the process, so that when we're ready for our fertility, it actually will be there for us. I teach about something called blind fertility syndrome, which is essentially this very loud message that you get that you should focus on your education, your career, finding the right partner, being financially stable. And when you've done all of that and lined everything else up, then you can focus on having children, and you can just expect that after all these years and decades of ignoring your biological clock and fertility, it will just be there for you when you're ready. And that's not necessarily the case. And I think that when women wake up one day and decide that they're ready for a baby, and it doesn't happen the way that they always believed it would, which is because it's natural to get pregnant and to have babies, that it will necessarily be easy to get pregnant and have babies. That's not necessarily true. And I think when women wake up and one day and realize that this isn't going as easily as they thought it would, they feel so misled. They feel so betrayed by their bodies, and they feel misled by all of the societal messages that told them that it was more important to get all the education and climb the ladder and have enough money and buy a house and all that stuff. And really, there's no perfect or right time to have a baby other than after you've primestered.
Right. Well, again, there's just so much in there. I'm like, oh, which direction do I want to go?
Yeah.
There's so much in, one of the things we talk about here on the show as well is, disempowering moments and how you were able to utilize that to step into your power. And when you talk about the timing and society saying that, especially for women, the pressure to have a lot of achievement before they are now allowed or permission to step into being a mother. And, I think it is a great conversation for women to really take back that power, to see when is it that it's good for them and their family and what that looks like. And I'd love for you to kind of share that, that experience for yourself, because, when you were teaching as a professor and going through the tenure track, right? It's like, you're supposed to focus just on that. And you defied that. You went and had your 3 beautiful super babies in and of themselves. And so I'd love for you to talk about actually 2 things. One, what constitutes a super baby, so people know what we're talking about, that, and about your journey, about, kind of going off-roading on the expectations from others.
I love that, off-roading on the expectations of others. We all need to do that. I always say that as a woman today, having both the family and the whole life you want is an act of rebellion, and we are here to support your rebellion 100%, and I am rebelling right alongside you. So first, let me talk about super babies. So it was my clients who actually came up with the term. I can't take credit for being that clever. And at first I was reluctant to take on the term, even though they would say, you have super babies and you help us have super babies, because I was concerned that inherent in the term is a social comparison of some kind, that one person's baby is better than another person's baby. And I didn't like that idea. And then I realized that slowly what I started to adopt was your super baby. You can have your super baby. And when you get to have your super baby, it has nothing to do with social comparison. All it is that you get to have the healthiest, happiest, brightest, most well-adjusted baby you can possibly have, given your genome and your epigenome and the genome and epigenome of the other person contributing DNA to your baby, and then any social parents who may be involved who also impact the epigenome. So that's what having a super baby is, and that's what getting to have your super baby is. And you're right. I have 3 delicious super babies. I'm
adorable.
Thank you. They're so delicious. And I'm campaigning for number 4. We'll see what my husband decides on that one. But I was really rebellious in the way that I did it. And I definitely went through a lot in the process, because when you're rebellious, especially in a good way, which is the kind of rebellion we are, what happens is that it disturbs other people. It bothers them because it reminds them of all the ways in which they weren't rebellious and they conformed to what society and the world said that they had to do and be. And people, it hurts. It's hard for people to watch you doing it when they feel like they sold themselves short in some way. Mm-hmm. So I was the first woman of color to be hired on the tenure track in history in the school where I started at USC. And you can imagine, I mean, the tenure track is a brutal place for any person. And it was exceptionally brutal for a person like me, who was really blazing new trails in terms of diversity and equity and inclusion, but also the ideas that I studied and put forth were also very revolutionary. And then I had the nerve to have 3 babies within the span of 5 years on the tenure track, which I don't think any scientist has ever done. And so, or it's rarely ever been done, if anyone has done it. And in my department, it had never been done. So I definitely suffered in many ways, because there were a lot of people who wanted to punish me for doing things differently. That the idea was that a serious scientist doesn't have all these babies. A serious scientist may not even get married in the first place. She may not have children in the first place. If she does have a child, it will be one child, but she won't come back and repeatedly have more and more children. And it was really a paradigm shift. And I am so thankful that I did not believe all of the hype, and I did not buy into the spoken and unspoken messages about what was possible for me as a productive scientist, and also as a woman who knew that she wanted to have lots of super babies.
Right. Well, Cleopatra, I love this so much, because one of the reasons I look at, not just disruptors in the world, but positive disruptors, because when you step into that brilliance and really, drawing a line in the sand to say, I can have all of this, and not from the place where you're exhausted, where, there was kind of like back in like the 80s and 90s, the having it all left women depleted and exhausted. So I love the distinction about having this wholeness to your life, to having the fulfilling aspect of life, and to see what that actually looks like. Ironically, my youngest daughter, Elizabeth, went to USC. That's where she became a pharmacist.
Oh, she did? How awesome.
Yeah. And, now she's in her early 30s and talking about wanting to have children as well. So it's interesting, just the order of things and how does that work, and making some of these decisions in that. What would you say for women who are serious, whether they're scientists or just in their field, to buck up against that system, to really stand for what they really want? Because one of the things that we know is that women tend to second guess themselves. They tend to, I worked when I was on the police department. I was the only woman on my squad. You were, not only minority in your race, but as a woman, as in, a colleague in the scientific world. There's so many layers of where to stand up and speak out in those environments can be very challenging for women. What do you suggest or recommend for women who really want to blaze a different path, that really want to be able to speak up for themselves, and it can feel scary and not heard?
Oh, such a good question. First of all, congratulations on your beautiful daughter and her accomplishments and where she is in her life right now. And I think that one of the best gifts a future grandmother can give their adult children and their grandchildren is the Primemester. So if anyone is listening to us now and thinking, I already had my children, I'm finished having children, this is still really important for you, because this is how good health is a legacy. We talk about leaving assets to children and grandchildren, leaving real estate. This is the most valuable asset you could ever leave, the most valuable legacy you could ever hand down. So I really want to stress that. I can't stress that enough. It is really one of the most important things in the world. I just want to congratulate you first on your beautiful daughter and all of her accomplishments. You must be so proud of her. And I want to say, for anyone who is listening to us thinking, I wish I had known about this when I was having my children are adults, this window has passed for me, that this is still really relevant and important to you, because one of the most important things that you could ever do for your own children who are already adults and your future grandchildren is to gift them the Primemester. Good health is a legacy. We often think about having real estate to pass down to our children and grandchildren, or a certain amount of money to pass down to them, but there's no greater legacy that we could pass down and that we could leave than this incredible epigenetic foundation and the good health that we give to our children and our grandchildren. So listen to this from the lens of your adult children as well, and your future grandchildren, because it's such a powerful thing that you can do for your family, and it's a gift that will long outlive any of us, which is what is so beautiful about it. And for the question about what do women do when they often question themselves or doubt themselves, but they know that they want to live differently than what everyone else in their circle, whether it's their professional circle or maybe even their families, have told them is possible. And, there's obviously, it's a complex answer, and it's a complex question, and it's a complex answer. But I think the starting place is really to trust yourself. When you have a yearning for something in this life, it's because it belongs to you. It's like I tell my hubby, I have a yearning for baby number 4. That means that she must belong to us. She must belong to me. And I really believe that. I believe that about our babies, and I believe that about everything else that we yearn for. The desire comes from somewhere. It's a part of us. And so if you have a yearning, a desire to live a different way than you've been told is the right way to live, or is possible for you if you want to be successful in your career or be taken seriously in your career, I want you to first just trust that yearning and that knowing. And the trick here is to listen more to the voice inside of you than you do to all of the many, many loud, forceful voices swirling around you. And that's so much easier said than done. But let me share with you a couple of things that have been a game changer for me. So when I was doing my PhD at UCLA, I was in my early 20s. And again, I came from a very different background than most people. I was really, really struggling and I was doing very well in school, getting every fellowship and grant. But it was a struggle for me because I felt so out of place in many ways. And I had such a steep learning curve. I had barely used email. And there I was getting my PhD. And one of the things that I learned really early was to ask myself, is this worry, is this stress worth one day off of my life? Is it worth one day of stomach ache? Is it worth one day of headache? If it's not, then I'm letting it go. And that was really powerful to me. I was like, would I give up one day of my life over what this person thinks about me? And if the answer is no, then I need to stop worrying about what that person thinks about me. Yeah. And the other thing is, they're all kind of related, and it's a beautiful awareness that life is precious, and that if we don't live life according to our own lights and our own authentic drives and yearnings and desires, we will wake up one day with a tremendous amount of regret over lost time. I remember listening to an interview, and the man said, in this time that I've been interviewing you, you're 30 minutes closer to your grave. And I was like, what? When you think about it that way, yeah, there's no question in your mind that every moment of your life should be spent on something that either makes a difference or that feels good. Yes. And if it's not, and obviously we don't all have the same degree of control over our circumstances. I mean, I have so much more autonomy today than I did, and so many more resources today than I did. So believe me, I understand. I started my life with so little, and it was such a struggle. And yet there's always a choice in the way that we look at the world around us and our surroundings. And that's where you have your power, in what choices are available to you. And so for me, I just learned to stop worrying, even if it's hard, to stop worrying so much about what other people want from me, what other people think about me, because this is my life. The only person that I need to answer to at the end of the day is myself.
Yes, yes. Cleopatra, I love your distinctions. One of the things, this talking about how you relate things to how it's going to impact your future, what it's going to look like. I remember another question that somebody had asked, like, whatever's happening to you in the moment right now, however you're reacting to something, whatever you're choosing, is it going to matter 5 years from now?
Yes.
And sometimes when you put a little bit of time between what's happening right now and what, you can project in 5 years from now, it's probably a blip on, the map of your life and what's going on. And when you can make some of those distinctions and you can get really clear about what's important to you, how you relate to things. Another distinction I really, really love is this whole idea about there's so much knowledge to be had, or there's so much information, and not only when you are learning in your profession and as a scientist, there's so much information coming into you, and people think that they have sometimes a better idea of what's best for your life than yourself. Mm-hmm. And when you take all of that knowledge and then you incorporate it into your knowing, you talk about sometimes that whisper is so small as far as what is really good for you and the kind of life that you want to live. It's so important to make that distinction between the knowledge, which helps us, and the knowing, which has us really step into who we want to be and what that looks like. And I love these distinctions. You and I were chatting before we got on about your twinkle lights, and you and I love sparkly things and just the magic that is in a space. And so one of the things I always like to ask my guests is, because we are intentional, is we feel differently in our office versus our bedroom or our kitchen. So what is your favorite room in your home and why?
Oh my gosh. I love our home. I think that my favorite room in our home, I have two of them. One is the main floor, which has the living room and the kitchen, because that's where we gather at the end of each day with my husband and I with our three babies, and we have so much fun. We have dance parties. And we laugh a lot, we play a lot, we have so much fun together. Every day is a party in our house, and I'm so thankful for that. And then my second favorite is our bedroom, and it's just like really reserved for sleeping. It's just for being together, for sleeping, and it's just so beautiful. And I feel like it's so delicious to be in that room. Like, I just love being there.
I love it. I remember someone told me once that bedrooms, especially master bedrooms, where you have a relationship, that those should only be for sex, sleep, and serenity. And that's
exactly. Exactly. And I feel like that's exactly how it is. It's not, I know I never take work in there. It's just once I go in there, I'm like, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Zen, the Zen space.
Yeah.
I love that so much. And it's so important, just how we create our life and what that looks like, and just to have that experience. It's funny when you were talking about that you are, you're rallying for the fourth one. So my oldest daughter, because I have two daughters, my oldest daughter who, works with us, her master's is in finance. So she's the master behind all the things that we do behind the scenes. And she has 4 children.
Oh my gosh, that's so awesome.
And she thought she was just going to have 3. And then 6 years later, there was a surprise baby that came into the picture. And now she has 2 boys and 2 girls. And now we can't imagine not having all 4 of them to have this complete package together. So you can share that story with your husband.
I totally will share it. I love that so much. How beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. So fun. We love having them all together, and, family makes such a big difference. And I so appreciate just your sparkle and who you are and what you do and what you stand for. I adore you. And I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you. And how can they do that?
I love you and your sparkle too. From day one, I saw you. I'm like, I love this woman. I would love to direct people to fertilitypregnancy.org. That's the Fertility and Pregnancy Institute website. And there on the homepage, you will find a very important resource, which is called the Ultimate Fertility Checklist. And it's a really great place to start to learn about primestering and some of the specific tools that we use in the primester. There are things you've never heard of before. So even if you're 10 years out from having your baby, or your children are 10 years out from having their babies, get acquainted with the information and start to implement or teach them to implement what they can. And then as they get closer to actually having their babies, they'll go all in on their primester.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for just your time and your energy and everything you put here. Again, I just feel like you light up the room no matter where you go. And this is such valuable, cutting edge information that people just don't know about. And it's so important. And I just love that that's how you are a positive disruptor in the world, is just, having women just take a stand and take control of their health and their fertility and who they're being. So I just want to thank you so much for being here on the show.
Thank you. It has been so fun to be here with you. I love and adore you. And this is absolutely my obsession. And I'm so happy to share it with your beautiful community.
Thank you. Thank you. And speaking of our community, we can't do this without you. This is how we get positive messages out in the world, is our community that shares, subscribe, put in any of your thoughts. We love whatever platform you're on to put in some comments, and make sure that you tag both myself and Dr. Cleopatra. Any questions that you have, any connection you want to have, we're here to support you in any way that we can with that. So please do that. Please share, get the word out. Women need to hear this message. So we want to thank you so much for being here with us today. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now.